I think it's a sort of a mixed bag situation at this point of time. If you look at quantitative easing, particularly from the US perspective, I think, and if I take you back about 5 years, there were a lot of questions raised whether the Indian economy was indeed coupled with the global economy, right? I think that debate has been put to rest right now. Typically, if we look at the situation right now, indeed, India is very much dependent on the global economy. Now, we are seeing that any economic action by the Fed in the US actually has a prolonged effect in India from two perspectives. One is typically the buoyancy of business as such, our exports are dependent partly on that. And second aspect is the monetary policy itself, because an US action has a direct repercussion on India. So indeed, I think at this point of time, if you look at quantitative easing in the US, we actually wait and watch because we think some of the actions taken by the Fed will have an impact on the Indian economy, on the export side, on the current account deficit side, and particularly even on our monetary policy situation, because typically dollar exchange rates, our import bill, etc. All these things are actually linked to that extent. I think India's placed relatively well at this point of time. There are macroeconomic challenges. I don't think anyone can deny that. And I'll just take it back to this whole Fed quantitative easing aspect. Now we know that the rupee depreciated against the dollar, right? And there was a hue and cry. Now part of that hue and cry is quite correctly because of the global context, but there is also a ramification because of our domestic economic factors. But if I look at other emerging economies, some of the currencies in fact fared worse than India, right? So if we sort of negate the global aspect and purely focus on domestic aspects, then what is very important is how does India shield itself from future, let's say, volatility which may arise because of situations like this. Because certainly situations like this can be repeated. And there are a couple of things come to mind. If you look at India's typical GDP growth pattern, yes, we have actually fallen. But typically a 4.8% or a 5% that we are looking at now is actually a very good number from a global perspective, because indeed India as part of an emerging economy, and if I put the BRICS context as a whole, it's a very good number to have, right? Secondly, if we break up India's GDP into agriculture, industry and services, we've seen that services growth, at least in the past decade, has been stellar. Part of that is coming down, and there are factors for that. Competition is going up, we are seeing certain subsectors in services not performing too well, but these are areas which can be addressed. Similarly, if you look at the agriculture sector, we've heard this time and again that India's agricultural production, India's farm output is dependent on the monsoons, right? But over the past decade, if we see the situation, we see that yes, the kind of technology in irrigation has actually gone up. Secondly, we know there are inefficiencies in the farm to market movement, the supply chain entirely. Now, there are ways in which the supply chain itself can be improved upon. So I look at these as certain macroeconomic imbalances rising out of inefficiencies, but nothing which are showstoppers, because if these corrective actions are taken, overall, the sustained growth that we require in India, I think that's a huge possibility.